All right, we're going to go first. Okay, I'm going to go first. Sure. All right, so guys, what we thought we would do today is, hold on. I like to look at everybody. Although Mary, I can't see you, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, 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 it's fine.
Just came back from exercise. My hair is messy.
Yeah, no, 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 it's all good. It's all good. I just changed it to gallery view because I like to be able to see people.
Yeah.
But no, what we thought we would do today, because this is actually a huge part of mindset growth, and that it's a huge part of healing, is to be aware and to know, and then ultimately to share your story, kind of how you got to where you are today. So that's what we thought we would go ahead and do. And then y'all know a little bit more about us too, where we came from and why in the world we're here, right? Like how did we end up becoming two people that want to do this type of work for people, with people. So I'll go ahead and start. I'll try to not be too long, but I'll just go and start. So my story starts with growing up, kind of having narratives in my head that were definitely not serving. Things that I used to always think about, or let me just start by posing these questions to you, because these were the things that were swimming in my head. Have you ever felt like your opinion doesn't matter? Or have you ever felt like you've had to hide who you really are? Or that, I know for me, I felt like everyone else had their act together except for me. Hold on, like right now, I got hair in my mouth. Or have you ever felt like you're not valuable or important? Or I know for me, I also grew up feeling like nobody cared. And just those thoughts were just my constant companion. There was just something deep inside of me where I kind of just felt like I was broken, that I was fundamentally flawed. I just knew, because of the way I was treated within my family, that I was unlovable. That was just the story I grew up with. And so those last three were kind of subconscious drivers. But I just lived my life trying to find answers, like trying to get out of the pain that living with that belief system about yourself caused. Obviously, I found a way out because I'm here. But what got me into that hole in the first place was that I just lived in a family where today, I think psychologists call it type A trauma, where I had two parents that were just very busy with their own lives. I had a father who was just poured his life into his business. That was his whole world. So he was both physically absent, but also emotionally absent. And he would be gone for weeks at a time, and we just wouldn't even see him. And then when he was home, he was just totally preoccupied. And then my mother dove into her world. So she was just very busy in the community. All busyness was outside of the family. But what made matters worse was that I grew up in a family where my father was very successful financially. So we had everything. I mean, I had everything. From the outside, it looked really good. I mean, we had more than one beautiful home. We went to the best schools, best clothes. I mean, just the best of the best. I mean, I just grew up having everything the world tells you should have in order to be happy, in order to be considered successful, in order to be content. It was the American dream and then some. So the problem was that we actually looked really good on the outside. I used to have people tell me all the time, "Oh, I just love your parents. They're just so sweet. They're so nice. I just love your parents." And guess what? They were like that. That wasn't the issue. I would have people tell me, I remember teachers who were younger, and they would be like, "Oh, well, if I get married and have children, I just want a family exactly like yours." The problem was growing up inside of that environment that looked picture perfect on the outside, but it was absolutely emotionally sterile on the inside. There was no physical touch. There was no expression of love or affection of any kind. So I kind of just lived up. I coped by actually turning to alcohol. I grew up in New Orleans, and alcohol is very accessible. So I actually started drinking at age 14 and going to bars by age 16. which you could do back then, go regularly, like probably three nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you would find me in a bar starting at age 16. And so I kind of numbed the pain through alcohol, this just emotional hole that was in my heart through alcohol. And I also numbed it by succeeding as best I could. I was good at school, so I did well in school. I was good in sports, so I did well in sports. I was popular. I did all the things you do, you know. But I didn't really realize how numb I was until age 20. And I was in college at this point, and my parents came to visit me. And they came to visit me because they were dealing with a crisis, the first crisis, real crisis that they had had. And they wanted to tell me firsthand that my dad actually would be going to jail. He was convicted of something called collusion, which is price fixing, basically. He owned a large marine construction business. And so that really wasn't what was seared in my memory from that moment. But what was seared in my memory was my response, because in telling me that, they actually told me they loved me for the first time. It was the first time I'd ever heard those words come out of their mouth in any capacity, much less directed at me. And what I remember about that experience was how I felt nothing. I didn't feel shock at the news, even though it was shock, should have been shocking. I had no idea. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel compassion for them. And then the words, "I love you," being directed at me, I couldn't receive it. There was nothing in me that had the capacity to hold those words, because I knew that I was unlovable. And I had a 20 years of my life story to prove it. I had all the evidence in the world to prove that narrative was true. But anyway, so I didn't know what to do. I now had self-awareness. We've been taught about that. I was now consciously incompetent. I had self-awareness, but I didn't know what to do. So I just kept doing it. I kept drinking, kept going out. And that seemed to serve me okay. I could still numb things out. But then in my 20s, I developed a condition that honestly, we still don't know what it was. It lasted for about 2 years, but the whole left side of my body went numb. And, my vision was blurred. My brain really wasn't working, which I had relied on. I was an engineer at the time. And I'd always relied on my smarts, basically, my ability to get through situations by thinking my way through them. My hands didn't work. My legs didn't work. I'd been an athlete. I'd played soccer in college, and I had to consciously be aware of just even walking, because I had to force my legs and my arms to work. They could work. So if you saw me, you wouldn't necessarily know, but I knew what I was doing on the inside. And that was, I needed to, again, really force myself, like pay attention to getting my hands and my legs working. And even my mouth wasn't working. I couldn't speak very well. That lasted for about 2 years. And so my parents had their crisis. Now I was having mine. What I had relied on was my own self-strength. And I didn't have that anymore. So I was having an identity crisis at age 30. And I'm like, okay, where do you go from here? I truly had no idea. And so I had depressive thoughts in high school, even suicidal thoughts in high school. They came back during that time. I was like, wow, if my doctors thought I had MS, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? But then around age 30, and Chris, you've heard this story, so you're not going to flush me off the call when I say it, but Ida and Mary, don't hang up on me when I say it, but I had no grid for what happened to me next. And I wasn't religious, so I wasn't expecting it. But I actually I was age 30, I guess I was pregnant with Olivia, and I had a face-to-face encounter with Jesus in my children's bedroom in a way that I didn't even think was possible. But I knew it was him because of the conversation that we had with each other. And all I can tell you is it was the first time in my life that I felt love. I was able to receive it. There was just pulsating waves of love coming out from the inside of who he was. It just created an atmosphere in the whole room that I've described it in the past. It's like a tractor beam. Like you wanted to get as close as you possibly could to the source of this love, and it was coming from him. And he had the most beautiful blue eyes that you just wanted to dive into and never come out. And I don't even remember how long that encounter lasted, but it totally changed my life, because for the first time, I actually felt love. Whatever he had in him stuck. It reached deep enough for me to actually feel it in a way that I had never really been able to experience love before that. So because it was Jesus, I was like, okay, I that's what I want. All this other stuff that I've been pursuing isn't working. Let me pursue that, because whatever that is, that's authentic. So I jumped into the church because that's all I knew to do. So I dove in head first. I studied the Bible. I was going to church every week. I was doing small groups. I was doing all the things they tell you to do. But what I realized is it wasn't the same. Like, it was still this pursuing things outside of yourself, doing, not being, right? So it was, like I said, it just wasn't working. That's when I started to get sick again. This time with an illness that nobody really knew what was going on. I just started getting sicker and sicker and sicker, one little symptom at a time. And it took years for this to really culminate in a diagnosis. But we found out later it was Lyme. And by the time I was diagnosed, it had pretty much gone systemic. Every part of my body was impacted. Lyme, there's a neurological component to Lyme. So I had the neuro Lyme, which is, I couldn't even, at its worst, you talking to me, I would have heard womp, 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 womp. I remember having conversations with people thinking all I hear is buzzing. It sounded like the Charlie Brown commercials, where I couldn't even process the words. It was just noise. And so I literally would have no idea what you were telling me, because I could hear you were talking to me, but no clue. My vision was blurred. I had ulcers all through my mouth. Every part of me was inflamed. I had heart palpitations. I developed asthma. My digestion wasn't working. My liver was inflamed. My gallbladder was inflamed. My pancreas was inflamed. My spleen was inflamed. My adrenals were shot. I mean, just pick your body part. It really didn't matter. Joints, obviously. I mean, my hands, my joints, every joint was swollen. It impacted every part of my body. And at its worst, I also developed food allergies and food intolerances. And Chris, you've heard this part of the story. At its worst, I was down to about 10 foods I could eat. And I remember waking up, drinking a glass of water, and actually my throat started to swell up just drinking the water. And I don't know if it was chemicals in the water or what. To me, it was water. And I remember thinking, if I can't even drink water, like, where do you go from there? And I was seeing doctors, but I was still declining. But after a couple of years of seeing doctors, it did start to stabilize. Something in me gave me the will to live. And I said, no, I'm going to keep going, because at that point, I really wanted to die. And I even thought about committing suicide because it was that painful. I was physically in pain. I was emotionally in pain. I was mentally, just talk about crappy thoughts in your head. And then even spiritually, I was in pain, because I knew the potential was out there, and it wasn't. But anyway, I kind of stabilized physically, but about 2 years into my treatment, I would always come home from the doctors just still in tears, because I would go and she would tell me everything that was wrong with me. And I just thought, I'm not going to ever get better. But then on my way home, one day I heard, because I went twice a week probably. So one day on my way home, I heard this voice in my head, and it was, Margaret, if you ever want to be healthy, or well, you need to start identifying as a healthy person. And I knew exactly what I needed to do because I'd been doing a little bit of mindset work, not calling it that because I didn't know what that was at the time, but I'd been practicing gratitude and appreciation. I'd been practicing a little bit of imagining my future, but that's when I flipped it and I just stopped seeing the doctors cold turkey, stopped taking all of my medicines and made it my job to really focus on mindset. So that's what I did. And then about a year later, the second thing I heard was, Margaret, I want you to stop going to church, because I had still been going to church. And so I did. I quit cold turkey, going to church, going to every small group I'd been a part of that was affiliated with the church. And really that was extremely hard because I left my entire community behind. This community I developed over the last 10 or 12 or 15 years, however long it had been, years, I left them behind. But the reason I had to leave that behind is because a foundational belief in me was that I was fundamentally flawed. And without meaning to do it, that narrative was being reinforced week in and week out. And so I quit. Again, I didn't know why necessarily, but I quit to continue focusing on mindset. And about 2 years into it, I realized I wasn't sick anymore. Without taking any prescriptions, without going to the doctor, just doing mindset work. I had gotten myself out of that hole from Lyme, and just doing mindset work, I'd gotten myself out of that hole of feeling fundamentally flawed. And the reason I stick with it today is because that love that I felt externally coming at me, as I was doing the work, and I wasn't doing it for this reason. I was doing it honestly just to be alive. I was doing it to get well. But the consequences of that, the added benefit of that was I actually started to feel that same love, but it was coming from the inside of me. And what I realized is that was the source. It was inside of me the whole time. The life, the healing, the joy, the peace. It was all there. I had just layered it with layers of crap from my childhood, layers of belief systems of being less than or not being lovable, not being worthy. Just you get rid of those lies and that stuff comes out. So I'm not anti-church. I'm not anti-doctors. I'm not anti any of that stuff. But at some point, if you're looking outside of yourself, what I realized is it's not going to get you there. At some point, you have to do this work. You have to do it, the deep sea diving internally. So my story basically is someone who has had depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, believing I was fundamentally flawed, someone who's been really sick. And this work has gotten me out of all of it. So I love doing this because I see the power in it. And I see that same source of beauty in life in other people. And oh my gosh, if I can help someone else tap into it, we all benefit. Because not only do they benefit, but if we can all be functioning with big pulsating waves of love coming out of us, that would be a pretty cool world. And that's a world I want to live in. So that's why I'm here. And that was long. Sorry about that.
That was great. You know, for everyone watching and for those of you on the call, you know, when you get to a point where you can uncover your story, the beauty of Margaret's story and the strength of it for everyone should know is to be able to sit there and admit and talk about God and church and seeing them and stuff. Like that takes real strength because we know how people are and we know that people judge, and people are really going to judge stories like that. But here's the thing, her story, my story, your story, you think people are going to judge it. But here's the thing, being able to stand there in your own river of truth and to, with conviction, say your story with a power and presentation that you own is not about them, it's for you. And Margaret and I have gone through things with other people. So we have been unlayered to be able to tell this story, but this isn't the first time we've told this story. So I can tell you, at least for me, the first time I did it, I felt a huge sense of relief letting it out. I can be honest with you, and Margaret will have her own. I got vilified by my family for that story. And what I knew in that moment was it wasn't my story that they hated, it was that they were seeing themselves. And that's the power in the story, right? The story doesn't come, the stuff that you're going to hear from me and the stuff that you've heard from Margaret, it didn't come right just then. Bits came over time from doing the work. And that's why the work is so important. As we get into those non-serving bound nature parts of us that we turn into our strength. And that's why we tell you they're not bad, they're good. We just need you to recognize them. In the beginning, they suck because you realize them. But as you realize them, you'll see them come up in other parts of your life. And how you need to be able to recognize them and deal with them in the moment. And, that's really where, I begin today and why I'm here. And just like Margaret, why I want to give back to that because of the power of it and what it can do to people. There is the saying that we've used. It's not about in the fitness industry, coaching industry, nutrition. They talk about setting a goal so you achieve it, so get your mindset right. That is completely and utterly false, and I'm telling you, and I used to perpetuate that lie. What it is you have to become the person you need to be to achieve that goal. And that is truth, all right? And why is that truth? Because when you unlayer your story and you tell your story, you understand those goals you want to achieve, you can't because of the story. And that's the power of the story. My story, it's not about addiction, sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, though that's a great book and a great movie. But it's actually really simple. And I think many of you are going to relate to it, and it'll hit home for some of you. It may hit home very personally, or you're going to know someone that has parts of my story, not all of them, but maybe parts. When I ask this question, there's no need to raise your hand. We're going to have to take a pause.
Daddy.
Yes, Daddy. What?
Juice.
Yes, you have juice. Kiss first. Kiss first. Kiss first. Get to me. Kiss first. Okay. All right. Okay. So, okay. All right. They don't need to hear some of this. Okay. Okay. Before I begin, though, don't raise your hand. Just think about this. Do you know anyone in your life that has been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, and or has multiples of those and takes medication for them? Or someone who has it and doesn't take medication for it. All right. Now, do you know anyone with dyslexia? Here's the thing. I got it all. All right. I got the gamut. I got it all. All right. And, my story, as I unlayered it, is really about a boy who grew up severely dyslexic with high severe anxiety, didn't know they had ADHD. And really that's just the start of where my story begins. And I say that because I didn't know those things until my early 40s. So I grew up with all those things every day of my life, trying to find coping mechanisms to deal with them. In my time, I've been a student, a son, a former husband, who was constantly told they had a problem. All the way, if I could trace it back, to someone who had some learning deficiencies, someone who dealt with anxiety, didn't even know it, who fell into depression at times, didn't even know it. And my coping mechanism was to work harder than anyone else to succeed. And that's the bane of everything that has happened to me in my life, okay? but has now become my strength. How many of you know someone that can relate to that story, right? Someone who has ADHD, maybe have anxiety, depression, could be dyslexic. And for everyone that has that, including myself, that's just part of the story, right? It bleeds into so many other areas. And I've told this story, I think, in here, at least part of it. But that boy I described with all those issues, I was brought up in a household where each and every weekend, I do not do this to my kids, by the way, each and every weekend, there literally was a tool placed outside my door for the weekend. That tool signified the work that was deemed family work and Chris work for chores that weekend. And I'm not talking pick up your room or vacuum or clean up the kitchen. I'm talking back-breaking labor, okay? My dad believed in that. He didn't believe in paying for anything in his life, okay? We did everything from build houses, decks, rebuilt cars. If we would buy a piece of property and we redo the whole thing, so there'd be metric tons of dirt outside, rocks, didn't matter. The worst day was when the basement flooded and there was not an electric pump outside my door, a hand pump, okay? Because he didn't want to pay the extra money for the electric because he had me, so I could hand pump it all out, all right? And I tell you this for this very reason. First, do you remember anything like that in your life as a child, okay? 2, how does that carry with you? Do you even know? But mine is super important because I didn't realize this until I started unlayering. I grew up thinking I was introverted, severely, and shy. My dad would come home every night and not talk to anyone, ever. He would go in his garage, work on his cars, go to bed. My dad was great. My dad is a great guy. Love him to death. A great provider, a hard worker. Sound familiar? But he was so introverted, his way to recharge was being by himself after being in an extroverted, right, world for that giving aspect of society. I knew intuitively that my father loved me, okay, intuitively. I never heard him say it, all right? But he did say it a few times at the end of the weekend when that back-breaking labor was finished, all right? Finished, okay? We're talking, it started, I would get up in the morning if I had games, football, baseball, didn't matter. I would go to the game. I would literally work up, change, go to the game, come back right to doing work, all right? He would show his love at the end of that weekend, maybe, all right? So I grew up being taught, hold on one second, yes. Okay, use my iPad. His iPad's glitching. It's glitchy. Okay, all right, sorry about that, folks. I was in the role. But so I grew up working hard to get object approval from my father for love, right? I always hoped he would tell me he loved me, and because I wanted it so bad, I would work, no questions asked, until it was done, right? To prove that I was worthy of his love. That's important. Didn't realize that. I didn't realize that I was not introverted until I understood I was never taught how to have a conversation because no one would ever come home and talk to me, right? And because I didn't get it a lot, I didn't believe I deserved it, right? But I still worked hard to feel like I was worthy. So even when I was successful in sports, doing the work, I didn't feel like I deserved it, the success, because I wasn't told that way. There is one thing my dad told me that I'll never forget, and why I chose probably the path I did in my life is one of the lessons, few lessons that he taught me, besides hard work and appreciating value in that, is I always talked about owning fitness facilities and gyms and stuff, and he always told me, just make sure you have a good location. So I did that. And that's really where the story for me begins, because it wasn't until that failure of that path that led me down this path to why I'm here talking to you. I built that business. I worked hard to raise the money from venture capitalist people because I wanted to prove I was worthy of being smart enough to feel like they appreciated me to give me the money, because I was still that back boy in the back digging ditches all the time, right? I was still the sports person trying to get approval from their coaches because I learned that from my dad. So through some big mistakes, some ego, some alpha male tendencies that I learned, money loss, I built that business. I bought it. I rebuilt it. I brought people in. I built 8 six-figure businesses for other people. I built a physical therapy cash business. I brought a concierge doctor in. And I'm highlighting that because that led to my first big breakup in my life, right? So out of nowhere, all of a sudden, those 80-hour weeks, missing the first year of my son's life, I was told to my face I was not good enough, to my face, that I was not smart enough, that I was not worthy of success. After trying to prove myself worthy, even though I thought I wasn't worthy, now someone reinforced that I wasn't. Okay, my income was gone. I had a family to support. I had no backup plan because it was out of the blue. The only thing I had for me was a health consulting business that I built that I could keep, but here's the kicker. That business I built, those 8-figure businesses I built, I had to now be one of them, with them, in the place that I built, because that was my only alternative. So teaching these people to feel good about themselves, to feel worthy, to stand for who they were, all those things I gave them or taught them so they would feel that and built a business for them. I had to stand next to them and feel the exact opposite, right? And I don't tell you this story to make anyone feel bad about what happened to me, because that doesn't even get bad yet. But there's a silver lining to everything that we've done, right, in our life. We don't look at it as a failure. We don't look back and get depressed about it. We look about what have we gained, right? And as I started healing from that, building my life back up, I woke up literally 3 months later. My wife told me she didn't love me. She was gone. When I thought I was doing everything right that I was taught. Work hard, provide, do everything you can to prove yourself worthy of being loved. So fucked up, just to say it. Alls I heard that morning was, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. It's not hard to talk about because I don't feel those things anymore because of the stuff that we teach. But that, like I said, that's where my story starts, but that's where my narrative ended. We never want to feel intentionally unworthy. We never want to have low self-worth. But I want you all to say to yourself right now, why am I listening to this guy tell his story? Because I feel really bad and he's had so many bad things in his life happen. What can I learn? There is a good part to this story. There's a good part to your story because we all have stories. Without the work I did on myself, I would not be here. I know that. Having severe depressive and anxiety issues, I would have been done. Okay? I'm here today as someone who's dealt with all those, someone who was finally clinically diagnosed because I had to go get help. At a point, the diagnosis meant nothing to me. You know, when I stripped apart every layer and every week finding something new, I understood where it all came from, right? I was that boy waking up, opening the door with a tool outside his door, looking for approval from his father, the introverted dad who didn't talk to him, never feeling worthy of success, never being worthy of someone's love, That's my narrative. That's the narrative I carried with me in business. That's the narrative I carried with me in relationships. I know it's the narrative I carried with me in my marriage, and probably was the default problem. And that's where it's going to stop. Because I recognize that. I recognize that I was taught to feel that way. That's not who I am. I'm more extroverted and I talk more than I could ever freaking imagine, and my family doesn't even recognize me. Matter of fact, they say they don't know me. I look at that as a good thing. They look at it as like it's a bad thing. And that's where I am now. You know, I've rebuilt a couple businesses. I have failed even after learning, but that failure didn't affect me one iota. The failure was just a learning stepping stone, and I'm happier than I've ever been. But I'll tell you this, that story comes back, but I have the knowledge and I have the wherewithal to be able to stop when it happens and know to peel it back and go a little bit deeper each time. You know, I will always be that boy wanting his approval from his father, but I'm not the man today looking approval from other people. And I'm not the person who thinks they have to prove themselves to be worthy of love. I have goals I want. And in the end, it's always going to come out to be the person I need to be to achieve the things I want to become in my life. You know, it doesn't matter if I have ADHD, it doesn't matter if I have dyslexia or I had severe anxiety. I can feel it now and I can stop it right away. You know, I'm actually the guy now that can sit with his father for the first time in his 40s and have a real conversation, not one about work or kids, but just a conversation. Took 40 years, but it's better late than never. As you unlayer your own story, it's hard. As you unlayer it, you're going to find deeper layers, and you're going to see where it affects you in other parts of your life. And I want you to think of and start with the moments in your life you said, well, I'm just like my mother, or I am just like my father. That is true, but you're not like them. You are acting like them because they taught you to be like that. And you've carried with it and took into it a certain way. So anything that's holding you back, anything that you feel hurts you, anything you feel where you've messed up or failed, it wasn't you. It was an influence aspect of your life. You just need to unlayer it and be the true person that you know you can be. And that's the power of your story. That's why we want to tell it. That's why we want to tell our story today. And you'll hear us tell our story over and over again, because it'll give you a safe place to start fulfilling that self in yourself. You guys can ask questions about this. I'm sure Margaret is just as much as me, will open up to anything. It's the fact that we can open up to anything is why we can teach this. But here's the most important thing. Don't ever get a coach that says that they're perfect, that they don't screw up, that they've had a perfect life, that they've done everything right. Don't take their money, don't give them money and run away. Because the good coaches know that they're only good because they have been in the hole. They know what their story is. They know all the failures it took to get them to this spot, and that they're not going to be perfect in this spot, and they're going to have to continue to work. So if you take anything from this day, take that. Because it's only on layering yourself and taking that failure and working through it, will you be more successful going forward. And be honest with it. All right. That was a lot.
Beautiful.
That was a lot.
Thank you.
Sorry for the interruptions. I got a kiss out of it though. Can't beat that.
No, and we got it in recording. Even better. Even better.
Are there any questions?
I just want to.
It's not a heavy talk. It can come across heavy, but it's not. Just so everyone understands that.
I just want to say thank you guys for sharing your stories. We all, like you said, we all have our story, and we can all relate one way or another. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Chris.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Same here. I'm really thankful for you guys to opening up. I feel like I have a combination of the two of you guys.
Right.
It's pretty interesting to hear that. And you're right. Both of you are correct because people do judge. So it is kind of hard to say your experiences. But although even my immediate family, like my husband and my kids, tell me like, you're crazy for the visions that you get, because I'm very creative, you know, and I get quite a bit of visions. And I had somewhat of a spiritual journey as well. And it was real, but I used to just see like paintings, but they started becoming alive, which was pretty incredible. I enjoyed it because it was just beautiful. I saw really beautiful stuff. And so I tell them, and they still tell me I'm crazy, and I don't stop because my visions are kind of like going to a different sci-fi level. So it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying those. You know, I know that it's part of it is because of, probably Margaret knows better than me, but I think it's getting your third eye into balance. You can open up to a different dimension probably, or maybe it's just something of that sort, like your energy points getting balanced. But yeah, and I was kind of intimidated at first telling my family, and but I just keep pushing because, and I tell them, I'm like, look, I don't doubt myself, so I'm not intimidated by you guys not you know, not accepting it or not believing it or not understanding it or telling me whatever you think, you know. So yeah, it was pretty cool. I really liked your stories. It speaks a lot to me.
That's awesome. You know, the one thing that I found is what's very interesting is when your family comes at you because you're making them face the mirror, I just tell them, listen, you're just a product of your mother and father. So I'm not mad at you. They just taught you just like you taught me. I said, it's just a lineage effect. But at some point we can stop. And then someone could say, well, X is super successful, doesn't have that. Right. But everyone has their thing. It's just how you take it in. You know, that's part of genetics. That's part of you moving stuff in. But it is proven through science that you can change those things.
Right.
You don't have to be a product of that. I mean, if you guys know the story of the blind piano singer, Ray Charles, grew up uber poor, blind. His mother, if you know the story, was super hard on him and wouldn't help him with anything. He didn't have a piano or anything in his house. It's just something he had. But he learned how to overcome because his mother was so hard on him. But he self-medicated. He did all these things because he didn't get any love from his mother. Like, you can unravel that stuff, right? So we are a byproduct of the people we've been around, our experiences and influences. We just have to own up to them and change the effect.
Yeah. I use them now to learn why, you know, I feel the way I feel. And I just had one episode with,
Yep.
Yeah.
And which I really flipped because that's the biggest control of our life, right? And then and then I realized that a little bit deeper of everything I needed to know.
Well, and doing this work for yourself first, you know, it's huge, because I know, because I didn't feel okay, I felt like I had to make everyone else around me okay. So that I would be okay. But what I realize now is, in doing the work on myself, I can now, like, I actually do have a good relationship with my parents right now, because I saw the mess in me and learned not to judge it, learn to love me for who I am. despite all the stuff I've done, despite all this stuff, I can actually now extend that towards other people. And, you know, I'm actually being a catalyst for change right now. Like, I'm hosting Zoom calls with my family once a week during this time, with the intention of them telling their stories. And it's actually been really powerful. It's a very powerful tool. Like, I saw my dad just a couple weeks ago. He shared stories from his childhood, ways he picked up narratives from his childhood story. And I saw him cry for the first time ever. And so telling your story is huge. Getting that emotional energy, so getting it up and out, is huge. And Chris, I loved what you said. And that was, I can tell it without the emotion because I've processed it. So anyway, it's a start with yourself. That's part of the journaling, is part of the storytelling for yourself. Find out what's in there, and then you can start to piece it together. But anyway, because we've all got stories, and it just is what it is, right? And when you start digging into your own stuff, like, there is no way in the world I'm going to judge anybody else. And I'll tell you why, because I'd be pointing the finger right back at myself, because I've been to the deep recesses of my soul, and I can tell you there was some crap in there. There's still crap in there that needs to come out. It's okay. You know, so it allows you to actually be authentically a help for other people. So I encourage it.
This has been great. So we'll see everyone Monday, hopefully. If not, we'll see you on the recordings. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This was great.
Awesome. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Have a good weekend.